Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you this evening to this talk at Soka University of America. Before I introduce Aria, I want to encourage you to enter any questions you may have into the chat. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you Soka University Artist in Residence and Professor Emeritus's work to you. Arie has exhibited his work nationally and internationally. He is a loyal and devoted husband to his wife, Sarah, and father to their children and grandchildren. This evening, Gallus will discuss his important series of work titled 14 Stations, Hey Yud Dalet, to which Gallus dedicated thousands of hours of his life to the multifaceted act of drawing as prayer, drawing as remembrance, and drawing as healing. Wojciech Fangor writes, "You have made something which I thought, up until this time, absolutely impossible to make. To express something in its own substance is inexpressible. To recreate manually, with the help of the simplest materials, a bird's eye view of the expansive network of factories of death and suffering, which at first glance are anonymous, but whose terror explodes when linked to the concentration camp's name. Please join me in welcoming artist Arie Gallus."
Thank you. Thank you very much for introduction. Uh, Before I start, I would like to state that this has been a personal journey. It is a Kaddish, it is a prayer for the dead, which is actually a praise. And it took me about 9.5 years to execute, plus a lot of other years later for corollary works and so forth. I will start right away with the beginning of how the genesis of this project came about. And hopefully, it'll show you the emotional, research, technical, and creative aspects of what it took to create this suite of large format drawings. I was an artist in New York, and I was working with reflected light paintings. I was, I guess we would say, rather successful at that point, being able to have a living, actually teaching and having my art exhibited in New York City. And this is the kind of works I well. This is reflected light pieces. What you see as color is just reflected light of the aluminum extrusions that you see to, on this on the front, like painted white on the front. And a whole series of this works, which I was at that time exhibiting, dealt with, say, strictly, geometric forms and formalistic aspects of it that I worked on. Of course, it did take some math to figure out ellipses and so forth. But this is what I was really interested in most of the time in my life, is views of the landscape from the air. So you can see that some of the works here are of that. There is no color on the white background. The color is simply reflected light from the light source. And it sort of gives the whole thing a glow, a sort of a beauty aspect and sort of illuminating aspect to the landscape. And this was when I was experimenting Monument Valley, as trying to figure out what and how, and it almost like scans on a television screen. The more sticks I have, the more lines, the more detailed the works are. So this is my detailed work. And January 19th, I walked into the YMHA and into an unfinished Holocaust memorial, which had 7 walls and 8th wall empty as an entrance. And I just noticed that the walls were divided geometrically in half, which was 14. And I thought instantly, I had one of those Mozart moments where I thought of 14 stations, 14 places. It just made sense. I went to school with Catholic education, so I knew about the 14th station of the cross, but I also The 14 in Hebrew, Hey Yud Dalet, means the 14, or an acronym for Hashem Imkom Damam, God avenged their blood. Now, there is no way one can describe or deal as a whole, as a landscape artist or whatever. And this is the first sketches, about 40 inches that I did. Those are the two crematoria in Auschwitz. So from the land of color that I came from, for the next 9.5 years, everything was black and white. And I kept doing other studies just to learn how to do things. And after I got the idea, I went over and Sarah was working in the same building, and I told her about this project right away, and I sketched it out. And then I sort of threw it in the garbage, and Sarah said to me, no, it's important. You got to do it. And I did some sketches and so on, but it wasn't right. So I decided to do research and actually do aerial views of the camps based upon photographs taken by the Luftwaffe and Allied reconnaissance flights. A short look into my past. That is obviously not me, but the woman on the left of the screen is my mom in Krynica in 1931. The person next to her, I don't know, but the woman in the middle is my mom's sister Laya and her husband Moshe Lieberman. This center person here is my father when he was released from the war camps in Russia in 1943 after Germany attacked Russia, and he was moved to Tashkent, where I was born. And the woman on the left of him is his oldest sister, my Aunt Gittel, and the man there, I do not know who it is. This is me in Poland. I'm about 5 years old, and this is me right here in the middle of a field of poppies and old, grass and so forth. And that's first grade in Lubavka. That is me right there. What is amazing about this picture, the teacher, by the way, she might look like Frau Verbissen or whatever, but she was really a wonderful, warm teacher. And what's amazing to me is that you see a picture of Stalin, a giant picture, poster of Stalin in the room, and it says in Polish, Niech żyje wielki Stalin, chorąży pokoju, which means long live great Stalin, the standard bearer of peace. Now, this is not Russia. This is Poland. This is not the Soviet Union. And it's amazing how such things can work on young minds as far as propaganda. At the same time, this week is actually a week that 78 years ago, there was a revolt. The Jews of Warsaw Ghetto revolted against the Nazis. As there was just a few thousand of them left at that point. And I did this here in high school. I think I was a freshman in high school then. And there was like people fighting in a ghetto and a broken door. And you can see there's, there's Stukas attacking, in the air. And I did collages about it. I didn't even know what Holocaust meant. There was a Herben, which means destruction of a temple. And this here, what is my connection to the Warsaw Ghetto? Obviously not, there's many divisions, but this person here is Emanuel Ringelblum, who recorded with his assistant and so on what was going on in the Warsaw Ghetto and hid him in 2 milk cans, and it was found after the war. But what's amazing about this picture taken in 1920 is that this is my mom right here when she was about 18 years old. In high school, here I am in Chicago, and I'm drawing this. The past is not the past that people say, it's always with us. And the past was with me. And instead of drawing flowers or whatever, I was focused on that. In college, I did the same picture here. And you can see the same door being repeated. And underneath here says, Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free, which was really not meant to be. It was laughing at the people who are coming into the camps. And underneath it, if you can see it in purple, it says Inri, Jesus Nazarenus Rex Iudorum, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, which also was something which we're just scathing against. That's not, I have no idea. And then this was what I felt too. I think a sophomore. It's one of my first woodcuts. of just everything burning. And the letter Shin, which stands for Almighty, Shaddai, Almighty, is burning. And then the 14 stations. I had a dream after this when I had this inspiration, and I dreamt that somebody gave me a jar, a small jar, which I just held in my hand, and it said soil from Auschwitz. And I turned it around, and it was like a list of, like a label, a list of ingredients. And it says Jews, Gypsies, Poles, Russian, all kinds of nationalities. And I sort of woke up with a start, and I realized that this is the way I have to go. And the names of the stations that I chose were just first thing that came to my mind, and they're arranged alphabetically, but through the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, and so forth. And the prologue was a later addition because I right away thought that Jerome Rothenberg, my friend and famous poet, should do poems with that, and he accepted. And he added an extra poem, which is a prologue, and I had an extra piece, and I did an extra piece of work of which we'll get to a little bit later. I also came right away that it should be like a martyria, an octagon, like I originally saw the thing, and I mentioned where it should be. And what happens when you get an inspiration, you have to execute it. You have to get the funds, you have to get the materials. And I spent time actually designing everything, including the frames, the stretches, the dimensions of the strainers in which the works would be, the hanging brackets, all of this had to be worked out. And you see that the paper on, my wife, obviously, was helping me. The paper comes in a roll, had to be stretched. We built this trough, which we watered it, and we put the paper in there to soak it, to release some of the sizing. Then the paper is drained, it's put on the wall, stapled, and then in a couple of days it dries and it's flat. Acid-free glue is put on it. Now you notice in the back are studies. So those are actually not the full-size drawings, but I was learning in them how to work 160-pound arches and to use charcoal in it. I knew right away from the start that it's not going to be painting all in color. This is going to be in black and white. And then it's placed on it, rubbed, trimmed, and the piece actually is about 4 inches in every dimension larger, and is put in a special jig that I designed upon which I was drawing. Sharing Plow gave me a grant because I wanted wrought iron frames around it. And this is Jim Wallace at the National Ornamental Metal Museum in Memphis, where we worked out on building actually the frame. And this is pounding on the special press. And these are the different samples, and I chose this sample here as far as the pattern. And then on top of the pattern, we got from this distributor in West Memphis a bale of barbed wire. And we would heat the metal again once the pattern was on, and then hammer in the barbed wire into it and pull the barbed wire right away. And the difference in the temperatures allowed us to do it, has almost an imprint. And Jim came up with a solution for the corner, which was the keystone. And you notice that this is what it looks like when the bar is attached to the L channel, and it's welded in from the back. And this is holes here, which is attached to the strainer. This is a view by Giotto of what hell is like. It's early Renaissance. I don't think hell and human torturing each other has changed much from that. This is Bosch a couple hundred years later, and you can see the flames and so on. And this is the way humanity viewed hell. This is the prologue. This is the place where hell took place. This is Belzec, before 1940, before they actually built the camp. The first drawing that I completed was Bergen-Belsen, but I'm going to start with the first station. Those same processes go throughout all of them. So this is what the finished piece looks like. But at the same time, my mom was in a nursing home, and I kept coming every couple of weeks to Chicago, and I would draw her at different stages and so forth. So I would spend drawings on it. This actually was taken probably about 5 months before she actually died. And when she did die, I came in, I didn't take my drawing pad, but I couldn't look at her. It was just too horrible for me. And I borrowed a piece of paper from the nurses and a pencil, and I did that sketch of her. And it says, Mom is dead. And in Polish, it says, Kocham cię zawsze, twój syn Arie. It means, I love you always, your son Arie. And then I had to get back, and I had to get back to work. It took me 6 months to do this piece. And this is how it starts, a small pen and ink drawing, where I decide what the proportions of the pieces are. Then studies, little 8x11 study of what it looks like. And then I almost fly above it in the spiral that I get larger and larger. And then this is the actual piece. This is put in with charcoal, and depending on the pressure of the charcoal in the paper, that's how deep the charcoal sinks in the paper. And then I erase it all. And after I erase it, I start erasing it, picking out with erasers, as you can see here. I start picking out detail. And this is what it looks like after weeks of work. This is what it looks like when it's all just at the eraser stage. And then I put in a piece of the Kaddish. Every drawing has a piece of the Kaddish in it, except I draw over it, so it's not visible. And this is what you see here, as you notice the area to the left of what I'm outlining here. That is already finished as far as charcoal and contact crayon, while this is still only the eraser. And I had a dream. A lot of dreams in those days. I dreamt that I died and I was lying in the middle of my grave looking up at a rectangle of sky, and this Hasid looks down at me, and I see that he sees it, my eyes are open. And I ask him, I said, how old was I when I died? And he says, 97. And I said, I died when I was 97 years old? He says, no, it's 1997. And I said, oh, heck, I better get up and go to the studio and draw. And I got up and I woke up. And this is the finished piece on that. Now, Jerome, just like I distanced myself from the actual horrors of it, I wasn't going to do a drawing showing people beaten, killed, dismembered, shot, bleeding, emaciated, and so forth. I couldn't do it, and that's why I went with this aerial views, because as you know before, I also worked on aerial views. Jerome did the same thing with this poetry for it, and they are total companions to this works. And the poetry is based on gematria, which is a numerical system where the Hebrew letters have a certain number, and then on the bottom here, written Hebrew letter, but in Yiddish, is Auschwitz Birkenau, and then the lines of it are based upon the numerical value on this. And they are in an exhibition and so on, those two pieces come together. And I know that Jerome is watching because I saw him here. This is this poem they wrote about Auschwitz, and I'm gonna do my best to try to read it. Now the serpent, I will bring back their taskmasters, crazy and mad. I'll meet them deep in the valley and be subdued, separate in lives, uncircumcised, greedy, shoes stowed away. How naked they come, my fathers, my father, angry and trembling, the serpents, you have destroyed their faces, remembered, small in your eyes, shut down soil, see a light, take shape in the dark, someone killed, torn in places, a terror, a god, go down deeper. Every piece has a poem with it. This is Babi Yar, which is a ravine outside of the city of Kiev, which in a couple of days, 38,000 Jews were shot. Now, what happens is you see a beautiful ravine and you see that those things are normal, but you notice one area here, one area here, it's different. Because what happens, this is where the bodies were and had no dirt to bury them, so the sappers of the Wehrmacht set off the charges and they put dirt in there. And this is actually taken, this picture in 1944, when they got the Russian prisoners to dig up the bodies, burn everything, and then grind the bones, so hiding their evidence as they were retreating. This is Buchenwald. This is the camp here, and this is the SS headquarters. This is the munition works and so forth. Those are rockets going in from the German defenses against US 8th Air Force, who's bombing here the works. You can see the first bomb exploding. What's amazing about this thing that my cousin, Avram Tisser was 17-year-old prisoner right inside the camp. And he says this is the first time he saw the guards leaving their posts and running. And to me, it was Saint Buchenwald, where I see this as his head and the saintly halo around him, and sort of a Byzantine robe that's coming in there while he's getting his heart bombed out. And since, as an artist, I studied art history, I realized something which I remembered from studying of early Christian painting, is this is a nativity. And this is, you can see the cradle, you can see the Madonna, and this is just the opposite. So an evil saint guarding the tower, just as a kind mother is guiding her baby. Belgium is the most difficult camp of all for me to draw, because that's where my uncle, my aunt, and my cousins, and hundreds of thousands of people from Galicia, which is the area of Poland that my family comes from, were killed. And you see, this is for every picture, when I did my research, I got topographical maps so I could see how the light hits it and how to accentuate slightly the light. I wouldn't change anything, no image or anything else, but I'd be heighten some light knowing that it's going up the hill or down the hill. And this is Belgium. This is actually taken by the Luftwaffe in 1944. This is where the camp is. This here in 1940, they had them build a anti-tank ditch because Russia is to this side. And this is when the camp was already destroyed. In the middle here was a old Russian tank engine and gas chambers, and they used the gas to asphyxiate the Jews who were brought in on the railroad right here into the siding. This was the Operation Reinhardt camp. This was not a concentration camp. It was just an extermination camp. And it was so difficult, I couldn't draw it. I would look at a picture at the source, and I would then try to go back to it, and I would forget between one spot and another spot what I saw and where to put any marks. And by the way, if you notice the white things here, that's a human ashes inside the anti-tank, ditch that was built. I had a dream, and I was looking at this picture of a man, didn't make sense at that point to me. And I was at the same time about a 5-year-old kid or 4-year-old kid standing in the emotion of the painting, if you can imagine that. And this man comes up and he takes my hand, and I feel incredible warmth coming from his hand. And he walks me over across his face, and he stands right above his eyes, and he says, "This is me. I'm your father's brother." Now, I knew my father's brothers, and that was not my father's brother. And all of a sudden, I noticed my hand drawing on top of the photograph where I was inside of it in my dream, and my hand was drawing with charcoal, and the charcoal transformed itself into this drawing, where the eyes were this here the eyes became this, the head thing here became this line here, the part here became this, something like that. And I realized who it was. It was my uncle. It was Moshe Lieberman that you saw before, who was married to my aunt, my mother's sister. And after that, I was able to come to the studio, and for some reason, I was able to spend the rest of the time seeing and actually recording what was there. This is taken by the Luftwaffe in 1940. This is 1944 by the Luftwaffe. Nobody can say that in 1940 there was a Polish camp there. There wasn't. There was a Nazi camp in 44. This is Bergen-Belsen, which is actually the first painting, the first drawing that I've done, a full drawing. And what it is that you see there's the camp and guards houses and human ashes right here. And what's amazing about this too is that people said to me, "Arie, why did you put a skull in here?" I didn't. That's exactly in the RAF photograph. There's this shape that looks like a skull for some reason. Jerome, at that time when I was working on the camp, came to visit me. That was in 94. And he said something which he said, "Arie, did you realize that you're drawing with ashes because of charcoal?" And I didn't, but it made complete sense. And that's exactly what I entitled the book that I've Jesus. That is, there was a book Actually, I was taking notes. I was keeping a diary for 9.5 years, and I titled it "Drawing with Ashes." And this is what happened. What's important here as an artist in this piece is that as I was varnishing it, I put about 10 coats of varnish on it because I didn't want to have glass on it because I didn't want people to look and have their faces reflected in the drawing. What happened here is that I put the varnish on, and there were like a spot here and a spot there and a spot here that was totally would just the varnish would sink into the paper and wouldn't pick. It was just like two dull black areas. So I didn't know what to do, and I had some matte varnish, and I sprayed it trying to see if that's going to help. And all of a sudden, I realized that the matte varnish looked like I spilled milk over this, and it was 4 months of work for me to finish this. And here I had two big spots of milk right on top of my drawing. And I did what any artist would do calmly and collectively. I went outside, started running around my field and screaming, "You stupid idiot, what did you do? You just killed 4 months of your work." And after that, I calmed down. I took some solvent. I took a white rag and I started wiping those areas and slowly was able to wipe off the new varnish. When I saw there was some gray showing up on the white rag, I knew that I reached the area for the charcoal. And then I sprayed it with the regular varnish, and lo and behold, that varnish sealed all the holes. So now for the rest of them, for the 14 other drawings I did after that, I knew there's going to be dead spots in there. And I did on purpose after I finished it, put the wrong varnish on, wiped it off, and kept working. This is a close-up I did in one of the studies of that. This is just a bunch of trees and a clearing and so on right outside the camp. Those are guard towers. And just amazing that it has a skull in it. By the way, my wife after the war lived here in the area that used to be the SS barracks when Bergen-Belsen became a displaced persons camp. She lived there for 5 years till she came here. This is Rogoznica Gross Rosen. This is the only camp that was close to the places where I lived. I remember passing the station, and this is the camp and so on. I remember passing the station and the barbed wire around it and so forth. I asked my mom, "What is it?" And she said, "It's a horrible place. It's a horrible place." I never saw the camp, and I couldn't find it. That was the last drawing I did. Actually, Howard Liebel made a movie on my finishing this drawing. And it's the last camp that I couldn't find any records of it because it was not along the front lines, etc. And I finally was able through Paula Sawicka and Mirosław Sawicki working at the Polish embassy in Washington, got me in contact with Marek Ostrowski, who's a professor at Warsaw University and also a geologist and a photographer. And I hired him to fly over and did it twice because one day it was foggy and it flew another day, and he took the pictures, and he took here what you see on this side, he took the picture of it as it exists now. I took that picture, I reversed it, I flipped it around, so I always use diagonal, so it's more disturbing. And I did this drawing based upon this photograph. And this photograph is from the book that was published by Polska z lotu orła, Poland from Eagle's Eye View, and it was a commemorating the Poland's accession to the European Union. Dachau, the first camp. The camp is here, workshops, etc., barracks, soccer field. I didn't know what those lines were. Those are barracks for prisoners. This is the first one opened up, that the Nazis opened up. I didn't know what those lines, the shiny lines here were, like you see those little black lines. And only when I saw later a documentary on freeing of Dachau, I noticed that those were planted. They were planted tall poplars, and they were casting the shadow. So not only was it a camp, but it was orderly, and I guess it sort of looked good no matter what happened in there, where the prisoners were inside. This is Helmno, outside of Łódź. This is a Żuchowski forest. I had a hard time finding this thing also. You don't see anything because it's an extermination operation on Hard Camp. There's a small road here, and there's a little narrow gauge railroad that goes in like that here. What they did is they brought the Jews from Łódź here, and also children from Lidice. They brought them from Łódź here in gas vans. By the time they arrived in here, they were dead. In this area here, the bodies were sometimes opened in cavities to see if anybody hid any valuables. And then this here, what you see here is about 200 meters by 20 meters by 12 foot deep. This area is a mass grave. But look at this. It just looks like a beautiful landscape in itself. And almost, to me, it looks almost like one of those chalk outlines of a figure lying in there. And, you know, there's people living here. There's a village here. There's some people here. There's another village here. But all of those things were hidden. This shows you the close-up of the same thing, how the frames actually look like. This is Treblinka. The camp also, this is taken by the Luftwaffe, but the Treblinka has been already destroyed. This is where the extermination camp was. The train, you can see it, the train coming, but the train will come in here, back out here, and this is an unloading platform. You know, I'm telling you what those things are, but I couldn't think about what those things are when I was drawing. Because the minute I realized what things were, that I was looking at a pile of ashes or guard towers or mass graves, I would cry and stop, and I would leave the studio, and I couldn't work for days. So the way I would solve this distancing, even that far, is I would just say, okay, that looks like a triangle, that looks like a wiggle, that looks like this is white, this is gray, and so forth. So this is the only thing right now. When I was there in 2014, I walked right here and so on, and in here, my wife's family, they were murdered in here, hundreds of thousands, among the hundreds of thousands of Jews who were exterminated in this camp. This is in Austria. This is Mauthausen. You see, this is the camp. This is the quarry where the prisoners work, having to walk up and down. I guess they were called like 180 steps or something to that effect. And what's amazing to me about it is, first of all, the imagery as an artist, like my brain refuses not to, you know, it refuses to accept chaos. This looks like a cow's head or golden calf looking at the camp in a certain level. And again, the camp existed, people were prisoners. The reason we have the pictures taken by the US Army Air Corps, a reconnaissance, and the only reason this is about an 1/8 inch by an 1/8 inch area of a 9 by 9 inch negative. What they were doing is down below here, some bridges over the Danube, which they were trying to blow. And it happened to be in my research, I found out that to look at it, and since I had the plans of the camp, I was able to find them. But if you look at this too, there's a farmstead, there's a farmstead, farmstead. They're all over the place. You know, to say that you didn't know that you were standing a mile or less from the camp, I find it quite incredulous. Majdanek, in the middle of, well, just outside of Lublin, what you're looking at is you're looking at the camp here. You're looking at the railroad tracks. You're looking at the small camp where the prisoners were departed and walk about a mile up to here into the camp. This here is where the crematorium is. Those three are graves. They're rows of ashes, filled with ashes. And again, you can see that the people were living all around here. And I always wondered what those things were here, what those little clusters were. And I later studied it, and they're actually anti-aircraft emplacement. This is when I was working on it. You can see I would have the original photograph and work with white Conte and charcoal on it. And you can sort of see here in the top, there's a string, and I would slide it along the string. This is Sobibor, which is in the middle of a already swamp area. The camp that actually the prisoners did revolt, and 400 of them actually were able to escape, although most of them were actually captured later and killed. The rest hid in the swampland. What's amazing to me about this is you can see everything organic and so forth, but this was also taken when this extermination camp was already bulldozed and trees were planted just to make it look like there's a regular farmstead, because they were already hiding the evidence. This is Ravensbrück, which is the camp right here, town of Fürstenberg. Around here, a railroad track again. Brought the camp. This is an equal opportunity camp for women. This is a women's concentration camp. About 25% were Jewish. The rest were Slavs, Poles, and so forth, and other people from other women from other countries. What is amazing is that here's the camp, and here you have about a mile or a mile and a half to the town. And you see there's a square with, I think, a church in the middle here and so forth. And this is This is the only place where I didn't give any, the only place here what I did is I actually painted this solid black without any texture of water, because that became almost a mirror. And if you walked by it, you could see your face in this. And what I had to do is I had to step back. While I was going to do this, there was a storm coming. I went up to clean the roof. My ladder collapsed. Sarah's father was taken to the hospital. So she was on the phone in the house. So I went without her usually holding the ladder for me. I went up, and next thing I knew, I was lying on the ground, and I had an extra joint between my elbow and my shoulder. And took me to the hospital. And this is what's amazing is they asked me in the hospital, because you're in total pain. And I kept asking for morphine, but asking me they were asking me questions like, did you faint? No, I didn't, the ladder collapsed. And finally, they gave me my first morphine shot. And one thing with morphine is that you still hurt, but you don't care. So the doctor came in and said, Mr. Gallus, how do you feel? And I said, I haven't felt that good since 1969. And she said, you're going to be all right. So as soon as I came home, I picked up a pen in my left hand, and I started to write to keep my journal going because I knew I couldn't draw. So this is what I had done before, and I couldn't continue. And you can see I'm already in a sling. My edema is starting here later that looked like a cantaloupe with little things sticking out 2 days later. The look on my face is oxycodone. It's not anything else. And I was able to go and smudge it, and I couldn't work on it. So this is what it looked like. And I had to stop for months before I could start working, before my hand was operational. But at the same time, I decided to create a series of drawings. They're called sinister drawings, because I did those drawings based upon my x-rays. And this is my arm when they brought me into the hospital. It just split. It didn't break my skin, but I could see the bone. And I did 20 drawings of them. This is someplace in the middle. And this is when the bone was actually healed. And I was able to get back. And I did a book of sinister drawings for a show in Philadelphia, where I used some of the metal from the frames. And this is what it looks like. And I picked copies of the journals that I kept during that time. And this is what it is. This I finally was able to do. Each drawing takes me approximately, I would say, 4 months, except for Auschwitz, it took me about half a year. Of course, there were other things happening at the same time. And also, unfortunately, I brought the Holocaust back to the house. My wife being a child of Holocaust survivors, and the past sticking in my head, and having to teach at the same time and having to work. And I did get a lot of support. It's all written in the book. I can't even start to say to whom I should thank and so forth, because I thank so many people making it positive. But Sarah knew that I collect old books about art, and she got me a book. And it was about Egyptian art. And all of a sudden, I looked at it and I saw this illustration of Anubis, the god of the dead, and it sort of almost spooked me out. Because again, as I said, the human brain refuses to accept chaos. And as it is, this here looks like that nose. And you can see the back area here. I see this line here. And you see this little lump here like that in shoulder. It's happening a lump. So it looks like Anubis is looking at this thing. No, it's not purposeful, but that's how my brain works. And that's the finished piece. This is Stutthof, which is the 14th station. Right outside, this is the Baltic. Again, when the Russian armies were advancing, they took most of the prisoners from here and they put them on boat, and they were going to ship them west. But of course, they decided in the last then to scuttle the boats and have them drown. There were a couple thousand prisoners still left. They just machine gunned them into the beach. Supposedly, from what I read, you can go there and not only collect amber, but you could find still on the beach some pieces of bones. And finally came the thing in 2002, after 9.5 years, that the show became a reality. And this is what it looked like at the Morris Museum, where they were hung together. And I wanted them to hang in a certain rhythm, which was a cadence, which was poem, drawing, drawing, poem, poem. So it's like a drum beat, bum, ba bum, ba bum, 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 ba bum, ba bum, ba bum, ba bum, 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 and so forth. I wanted that kind of cadence, and I wanted this to be a place where you can sit and contemplate. And that shows you how large the works are. This is 9.5 years of my life, my family's life, my friends and supporters' life. This is my cottage. Now, in 93, I wrote to Dr. Elie Wiesel. I've met him a couple of times before, and we did have conversations. And I wrote him about the project. So he wrote me back. He says, "Dear Arie Gales, thanks for your letter. Your words are moving and poignant. What about the drawings? I will be away till September, but I would like to see them. With warmest wishes, Elie Wiesel. Cordially, Elie Wiesel." Well, he couldn't come then, it didn't work out, but he did show up at my exhibition and he did deliver a speech and so on. I was completely honored. This is us together in front of the prologue painting. Now in hindsight, when I look at it, I look a little bit too formal for it, but I was totally honored to have this, what I consider a great man here. And through the help of supporters, a catalog was printed in the 14 stations, and I sent the catalog to a couple different people. So when you look at it, the catalog sort of looks like it's mirroring the way my show is set. And the designer of the catalog was a young man from Senegal who was one of the most sensitive people to understand what I was dealing with, although coming from a different culture, different continent. Understood it and did an incredible job in making this catalog. And as I had this catalog, Sister Rose Staring from Seton Hall, who's really a supporter of Holocaust studies and supporter of Holocaust survivors, said to me, "Why don't you write to the Pope?" And she gave me the address, and I wrote to John Paul. And I got this letter, which says, "His Holiness Pope John Paul has asked me to thank you for your kind presentation of an inscribed catalog of the exhibition, 14 Stations, Hey You Dalet. He appreciates your thoughtful gesture and respectful sentiments which prompted it. His Holiness trusts that your vocation of the Nazi death camps will inspire sober remembrance of the horrors of the Shoah and a firm resolve to build a future of reconciliation and peace in the world still torn by violence, injustice, and oppression. With prayerful good wishes for your creative work, he cordially invokes upon you an abundance of divine blessings. Sincerely yours, Monsignor Pedro Lopez Quintana." I also got in touch with my old colleague, the artist Wojciech Fango, who returned to Poland, probably being one of the most preeminent artists in Poland in the 20th century, the beginning of the 21st century. And I sent him at that time a catalog, and he wrote me this letter. I'm not going to read the Polish version. What he wrote me is, "Arie, today, the 14th of October, I received your personal letters, reproduction, invitation, and the exhibition catalog of your impressive work of art, 14 Stations. You have made something which I thought up to this time absolutely impossible to make, to express something that is its own substance and expressible through art, but particularly through visual art. I saw many attempts to show war crimes in the past and also in contemporary times. They were not convincing. Picasso's Guernica is first and foremost a personal statement, a style, Picasso's substance. It is a painting and it expresses Picasso and not that served as a pretext to paint the painting under the title Guernica. One can say only that it is good, that it is dramatic and so forth, but it doesn't stop being first and foremost a Picasso. In your work, for the first time, I came in contact with work of art which crosses that link of medium and art, with aesthetics and with the author, to create manually, with the help of the simplest of materials, a bird's eye view of the expensive networks of factories of death and suffering, which at first glance are anonymous, but whose terror explode when linked to the concentration camp's name, was in my conviction the first work of art which, distancing itself from art, aesthetics, artists, approaches a substance of the meaning, not as a pretext, but as truth. Arie, I congratulate you. Wojtek. And this was a movie that was done when I was filming, it was done when I was drawing by Howard Leboff. You can still contact if people want to see this thing. I do have a copy, but that is his movie and it's his work of art. He did this documentary, and if you can check out him if you're interested in seeing the work, you can check him. You can contact him directly. Now, while at Soka, I decided to complete my suite of woodcuts. Now, what's happening with the good guys, it's just the opposite. There's no different grays and so on. You have to sort of get to the source and to the basic meaning of the icon of what it is. So what I've created is, again, 15 drawings. Auschwitz, Babi Yar, Buchenwald, Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen, Gross-Rosen. I think it's out Dachau, Omno, Treblinka, Mauthausen, Majdanek, Sobibor, Ravensbrück, and Stutthof. I did it an edition of 36 hand printed, 15 prints, an edition of 36, a hand printed Japanese method on rice paper. This traditionally, you can see in my face, I was pretty tired after a couple of months of doing this process. And actually one suite right now is in the possession of the Jewish Museum Galicia in Krakow, Poland. And this is what the suite looks like when it's exhibited. I was asked also to do some other drawings. This was for the crimes of the Wehrmacht, where what it is it's called the first movement of September 1st, 1939. What you see is I took the picture of the Nazi army breaking the border barrier to Poland when they attacked in September 1st, 1939. I flipped it around. I put the insignia of the army on top of that. And this is an actual score of Beethoven, okay? Ninth Symphony, it was Schiller's work. You know, alle Menschen werden Brüder, wird ein sanfter Flügel weit. All men will become brothers under your, I don't know, calm wing and so on. And there was sort of an ironic piece that I felt about. And it is too, later I was asked to do something about crimes of medicine under the Nazis. And what I did simply is I took the ancient Greek writing of the Hippocratic Oath, which says you should first do no harm and so forth. And I just erased every inch of it in inch stripes, which reminded me at that point of the bars of the prison, or definitely of the prisoner clothing. And I went, and there was a triptych, so therefore this thing went 1, 3, they went all the way through it. So all of the things were erased by that point. Now back to the hell. Nope, this is not. This is it. This is my book, basically. This is the art books I used as a journal. And I have a book that I'm trying to publish. It's called Drawing with Ashes. And now, as I told you before, I put the Kaddish and 1/14 of the Kaddish in every one of the drawings, but I didn't want people to read it at then. I just wanted it to be my way, meaning I can say the Kaddish and so forth, but the way I said it is with the pressure of my hands, the pressure on my heart, my soul that was poured into looking at every single inch of that area. That was my Kaddish, praying the best that I can in the most honest way that I can through my hands. But nonetheless, the Kaddish is embedded in there. And I would like for you to see it. This is in Auschwitz, and I'm going to read the Hebrew. Itgadal vitkadash me rabah, ba'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yamechon b'chaye dekol bet Israel, b'agala u'bizman kariv v'emru amen. יהי שמי רבא מבורך לעולם עולמי עולמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר, ויתעלה, ויתחלל, שמי בקודשה, ברכו. לאלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונהמתה, תאמירן בעלמה, ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Arie,
Yes.
you can look and see if anyone has written questions to you privately in your chat.
I don't know how to do that.
Okay. If you just roll the mouse over, you'll see.
Where? 1 second. Chat. Here's chat. I see it.
Click on it.
I just clicked it. Okay. Okay, I see Mauthausen's outside the town of Linz, where Adolf Hitler spent his childhood. This comments, thank you. Yes, I'm just going to try to move something here. Let's see if I can get out of this and bring something over to, no, I can't. Okay, I'm gonna move it. I'm gonna move this. Now you can see me better. Okay. Can somebody ask a question? I don't see anything on the chat. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's okay. If anybody had asked a private question to Arie, you can resubmit it so that we can read it. Just use the chat function.
Unmute, tell them, unmute.
Unmute whoever is asking, right?
Is this Zelda? Zelda, I'm gonna ask you to unmute. You have to unmute yourself, Zelda.
Unmute, you have to click the red thing.
All right, now you can hear me?
Yes.
All right, I actually wrote you a question. I know you, it seems like forever, gladly, appreciatively. You are not only an artist, you're a dear human being and funny. If you should be with Aria, he is there's not a joke that he doesn't have. You kind of explained at this presentation how you wound up to do this kind of art. What inspired you? At what age were you inspired to? And also, when you were in Poland, how did you feel about being a Jew and among the ashes of the Jews?
Okay, I'll answer in order. First of all, I started to draw when I was 3. You know, in Poland, they have the floors are painted sort of a burgundy color. And we were living in Lubavka, and the window looked out into the railroad tracks of a station that was not far. And I could see trains going through that. So my father, being a tailor, had that white chalk, and I would take the chalk, and on every board all along, there'd be trains. The whole floor was filled with trains. So people said I was going to be an artist. My parents were proud. They didn't try to make me into an accountant or anything else. They supported me. You know, I heard from other artists that how the parents were against their becoming artists and so forth. And how did I feel in Poland? I felt we were living openly as Jews. We were in the town where my parents come from, both of them were destroyed. We were moved to Lower Silesia, you know, and I grew up there. Yes, I had my best friend happened to be a Catholic boy named Adam. But at the same time, I also heard that I was personally, not ethnically, but personally responsible for killing Jesus. You know, so I dealt with it by just being proud and understanding. And I had I did my first 8 grades of grammar school. I did it in 3 countries and 5 different schools. So I was always the new kid, in school. So one way of getting to get respect from the other boys around, usually because they challenge you, is you beat them back. That was one way of doing it. The second way I was able to do it is that I could draw. And they got really, if a kid said, hey, can you draw me a gun? Yes, I drew him a gun. Can you draw me a tank? I could draw a tank. Can you draw me a flower? Yes, I could draw you a flower. And it was one way I was able to communicate. And I would basically say that on that level, with my parents, my father a tailor, my mother a seamstress, we moved to a bigger town called Legnica, and it was quite interesting to grow up there. I do still love the fields. When I went back to Poland in 14, it was quite amazing to be able to lecture in Polish to a group of people. And what happens, I never forgot the language. I still read the books in Polish and so forth. Of course, I speak Yiddish and in other languages, but I wanted this to be a people to understand that the mourning that people go through is very personal, and everybody has some kind of tours or some kind of things happening. We unfortunately had a tremendous horror before us, and somehow we survived. And when I talk about, God avenged their blood, I don't mean by avenging the blood by destroying the people. I mean avenge by my being as happy human being, by telling a joke, by loving my wife and my children, my grandchildren now, my friends, my other relatives. That's my revenge. I'm alive.
Wonderful. Thank you.
It's difficult,
Any other questions from the audience?
I see people, but there's so many things I can answer if you are interested in, but basically it takes a certain kind of insane determination to persevere for 9.5 years through sicknesses, through losing a parent, through all kinds of other crises that happen, to having a broken arm, to you name it, to seeing things. In the middle of this, 9/11 happened. It was a beautiful sunny day, and this plane hits the building. And my daughter was visiting from England at that time, and we had to take her to the airport. Of course, nothing was flying. And then a couple of days later, when they actually opened the airport, we drove her to Newark Airport because we're living in Madison, and Sarah and her went into the terminal, and I just kept circling around it. Every time I came over this high overpass, I could see the ashes and the smoke, from across the bay, right across the river, Hudson, and it smelled like ruins. It smelled like what must have smelled when the crematoria were going for all the burned human bodies and so forth, and the dirt and the burned bricks and so forth. It was quite a shocking experience to get through it. And one of the things, even no matter how scared I was, I felt that I'm in a country where no matter where I am, basically, if I would be in an accident, the MTIs will come and help me, that I would get help, as opposed to the MTIs, like my friend Martha Schneider said that she survived. They left just before the war started, but they left after the Anschluss. They were from Vienna. And she said, Arie, you can't believe me. He says, you can't believe how horrifying it is to be able to be walking on the streets of Vienna and knowing that if somebody were to hurt me or someone, I couldn't call a policeman for help. Everybody has their own versions of it. Yes, sir. Are there any other questions, please?
Arie, you have a question from Michael Weiner. He asks, where did he find the first photograph? Michael, do you want to add to your question at all?
Unmute. Mhm.
Go ahead, Michael, we can hear you.
Okay. Where did you come upon and how did you come upon the first photograph?
The first photograph, I went in to a library and they had a photograph of Bergen-Belsen for some reason, which I was able to photograph. Not really, but it wasn't good. It was very bad thing. So what I realized from my initial sketches, which are sort of cartoonish in a way, is I had to go and do research. So I went and I spent days upon a time, leaving home and going to Washington, D.C. and doing to the National Archives, at the Smithsonian, captured German war documents, archives of the Luftwaffe. There was a whole train captured of those pictures. The Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., Kiel University in England, and oh my God, bomb assessment records, National Archives. So I spent, literally about, I would say, all throughout the 9 years, I would say about well, more than that, maybe about 5 to 6 years that I had to find their pictures, which I went through all the different archives. In fact, the one of Stutthof was by a total accident. I looked at some thrift shop. I looked at an old picture of National Geographic, and there was an article about the English raid on certain munition plants. That was, and I looked at the flight record, and it showed us flying right over Danzig, in the area where Stuttgart was. So I called up the Leeds archives, and they called up the RAF archives, and they sent me some pictures, and the picture came in, and with a letter saying, sorry, we couldn't find what you were looking for, and I looked at the picture, and there it was there, except they didn't know about the floor plans, what they looked like, the site plans. So it was a lot of research, it was a lot of research from finding locations on a map, topographical things. Right now, my research right now is trying to find a permanent home for the piece. I would love to have somebody, some institution to have that piece, so it will be actually exhibited and people could see it. Sort of, I would like it to be sort of a place of contemplation, a chapel of sorts. If it's, yes.
Am I still on?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I had to unmute again. What I'm getting at is, what was it about that first photograph you saw that captured the artist in you?
That's the point.
Okay, and what happened is that Mozart moment happened right then when I saw originally the empty walls. I just knew that had to be. It was there already in a way. Okay, I just didn't. I was going to do it sort of out of my mind, imagining what it would look like, or imagining what I've heard about and so forth. And what I drew at that point, okay, it was more of a expression of a political statement of sorts. It wasn't the essence of it, until I actually saw the first actual photographs that were existing. And of course, every one of those images that I found in my research in different places, I had my friend Tim Volk, who did all the documentation photography, make large prints of it, 16 by 20s, and I donated it to the National Holocaust Museum and Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington. And I donated individual prints to some of the camps that were there because they were non-existent. I remember being in the archives, National Archives, and taking a break. That means during the day I only would stop to have a hot dog, and that was it. Going to the bathroom. I was there sitting and cranking away at thousands and thousands and thousands of images. And I went up to the table, and there's this woman, and she's speaking very halting English, and I noticed her accent. So she's speaking. So I asked her in Polish, says, "Can I help you?" And she said, "Yes, I'm looking of a picture of Auschwitz of such and such and such. And I said, ah, I found it already. You know, she thought of spending a couple of weeks in DC trying to find it. And the first day she came in, she ran into me. And then I was looking for pictures of Buchenwald, and I found something in one of the archives. And it was mostly obscured by smoke from the bombs. And I went, yes. And the guy sitting next to me said, you found what you're looking for? I said, yeah, look. And so he looks at me and says, hey, I know where there's some better pictures of that from the same raid. And he took me to another archive. So the researchers, we were helping each other in that way. But I realized I had to, the instant was there right away that it's going to be my prayer. Yes.
Any other questions?
Any questions? More?
Lisa Pine has a question.
Sure. Unmute.
Now that we have heard you, this is such a complex set of drawings. And if I were to go into a museum and read the poems and see the drawings without having this presentation, it would be difficult. Do they provide your conversation, your phone conversation, when somebody goes to see this presentation?
No, they do provide catalogs, but no. What I wanted really to do, and that's the reason why I drew over the Kaddish, for instance, and so on, and I've kept it this way, is I wanted people to sort of, instead of spoon feeding what they should feel, they should look at it. They should look at the works and see it as, because what you're looking at is a landscape. You know, if you didn't have anything, you know, that's what the point being, that the Holocaust didn't happen on some horrifying hell place. It didn't happen on some, you know, boiling volcanoes or anything. It happened among beautiful forests and fields in Germany, mostly in Poland. You know, it happened in with flowers and birds and you name it. And when people, what I've noticed when people came to the open and I observed, you know, how they're doing is that there should be a piece of contemplation, the dichotomy between an actual sort of a beautiful image and the horror which that image actually represents. So
no question, yes. Okay. Because they've cleaned up the camps so much now, when you go to visit them, you can never imagine the horror. I mean, we're Jewish, we know that, but for people that aren't, it looks like, oh my God, look at how pretty this is.
Well, what I noticed is that when I went to visit Treblinka, and I didn't feel like people asked me, did you go to camps and so on. And I visited Treblinka, and I knew that my mother's family, you know, my wife's family, excuse me, was there, buried and murdered. And I just went in there, and there's this field of stones. This field of stones and memorials, you know, with names of villages and towns and so on. And I said, how am I going to find in those thousands of stones what happened? And something inside me told me, go to the left, and I did. And right away, I came upon Piaseczno, which is, you know, her mother's, you know, birth town and so forth. And I put a few stones on it and said Kaddish. And then I wanted to find out Gura Kalvaria, known as Ger in Yiddish, you know. And again, something told me, go to the left. And I went to the left. And sure enough, there's this thing, Gura Kalvaria. And again, I was able to say Kaddish for it. It's a strange place because there were raspberries growing there. And I picked some of them, and they were sweet. And my friend Mirek, you know, and Paula Savicka, who took me there, you know, amazing, you know, amazing people actually. And it was an emotional thing. And coming back from there to driving back to Warsaw, I noticed something I haven't seen since I left Poland. On every telephone pole, there was a stork, you know, what you call it?
Nest?
Yeah, it was a stork, big stork nest, you know. And in one of them, I looked, and there were like three little chicks, stork chicks in there. And it sort of said life, it made me feel better that life continues.
Well, thank you very much. It's certainly been a pleasure, and I enjoyed the presentation so dramatically. Thank you.
Thank you.
It looks like Zelda has a question.
Moment. Arie, sorry that I'm bothering you, but I'm known for a lot of questions. How did you feel for 9 years not to paint color? Here you were obsessed. How did you feel? Did you miss it? Did you feel guilty? How did you feel?
Well, two things. Once, I think it happens to you that you get this kind of a moment in life that you feel something is important that you're doing, and that was a feeling that I had to do this. But people were asking me that during the years, like especially toward like the 9th year, Arie, what do you feel and how do you feel? And my basic answer was I wanted to pour all kinds of colors on the floor and get naked and roll in it. I just wanted, I just wanted the color. Yes, I missed it, but it just had to be done, and there is, and I went from there, I went back into color, and then I got a job here at Soka and came out here and started painting more and more in color. That's what happened, but I did miss it, I have to say. Charlene? Unmute.
Oh, hold on. Where is she?
She's on it.
I'm trying to get to her. Hold on.
Okay. Click that little red microphone.
There we go. Now I had to wait for the host to do it. I know I've seen the through the years when I visited you in New Jersey, watched the progress, saw your exposition at when you first exhibited it. I think the next book that you should publish along with this is My 9.5 Years by Sarah Noskalis. I think it is an important companion piece to all that you have gone through, and you cannot deny that she went through every second of this. And I would, she's a writer. I think, Sarah, I know you're sitting there in the corner somewhere. You got to get that book going. It's got to be the second volume. Hi, Dolly. It's got to be the companion piece.
How I didn't do it.
You did it. You did.
Do it. I mean, behind every, what is the story? Behind every man was a woman who really did, supported him.
Believe me, true words were never said, and I would have fallen apart. Believe me, it would have fallen apart that she held the whole family together. And, and I was obsessed on a certain level. We did try to meet with friends, but I would, finish teaching and come home and go to the studio, then show up for dinner, go back to the studio. In fact, I would sometimes show up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and Sarah would already be, asleep. And there was a very big strain on her. I remember one night in the winter, I don't know which winter it was, I was trying to make it back, and it was an incredible storm. And then the plows came and they plowed me in the studio. And there was like about a 6-foot high mountain of snow, and I couldn't get there. And so here's 4 o'clock in the morning, I quit working, and I'm walking back to the home, and I make it into this pile of snow, and I can't move. And I'm saying, okay, now what? I'm in my backyard. I cannot move forward. I'm stuck. And Sarah's not going to wake up because she knows I work late. So she figures I'm in the studio. In the meantime, they're going to find the stiff artist right there in the morning. And I figured something out from my swimming days is that displacement, so I just threw myself on it forward, and then somehow my body weight was displaced on different areas. And I was able to actually crawl through the pile and fall on the other side and get home, nicely soaked. But no, she held me together. She held the whole family together. And as I said before, it's my friends and so on. I see who supported me. Some of them I see here right now. Some of them I don't. I see Judy, and it's not, it's a kind of undertaking. I actually thought in my ignorance that I can do it within a year. I actually thought so when I started, that it's going to take me a year to do it. Not realizing that not only by the research and so on, but with the pain of it, I felt like, with every stroke, I felt like a certain kind of an archaeologist who by every stroke and so on has unearthed certain thing from the past. They've taken this piece of paper that was all smudged and dirty and pulled things out of it with my erasers and pushed things in with charcoal. It was hard. It was hard, and believe me, I can't tell you how many times I would break down in the studio, literally crying and walking away and not being able to work for a few days, simply because when I realized what I was doing and what I was looking at ashes. Although at the same time, I did think of the Valley of Dry Bones. I did think of the ashes of my people being resuscitated and coming back. I did. There was part of this kind of a prophecy that I felt I was living within. And I was just paying my homage, my honor, through this Kaddish, which in a way is sort of a dafka. Dafka means despite of or whatever, if you know that phrase. Yes, you didn't, what were you, Holy One? You saw it from this heaven. How come it didn't do anything? But despite of that, I'll praise you. I can probably talk for so many hours upon that, but it's emotional. It was a very emotional experience, and it went through from my children, through my friends, to everybody, because that's sort of 9.5 years. And not only that, when I came here and then transposing everything and putting it on writing, taking whatever my notices were and my journal and transposing it and going in and trying to get it into a position where I can send it out, to publishers, or doing the other works that I didn't finish yet because I have to finish the things like the woodcuts and so on in other areas. That's it. Any questions, comments?
Lisa has a question. I'm going to ask her to unmute.
I just wanted to ask you, I wasn't sure about the time frame. How old were you when you came to the United States?
I was 14 and a half, when we landed in December 29, 1958.
But you met Sarah here in the United States, or you knew her?
You just opened up a can of worms. So.
Oh,
A wonderful can of worms, delicious worms, one of those candy worms,
Well, I was born 1940.
Yes.
And so I grew up with, in a Jewish household that we cared about what was going on and felt so helpless. So hearing your story is so riveting, and that you came out of it and have accomplished so much. So I was just wondering how old you were when you came here.
Well, first, we had papers to come here in 48, but due to the wonderful State Department, we couldn't get in here till 58. So that's another story that you can talk about. But I remember coming to New York and looking at the Statue of Liberty and feeling good about it, but disappointed that it wasn't gold. It was green. I remember that. I came to Chicago and I knew 3 words: mother, father, brother. That was it. And they put me in first grade class to learn English. So here I am, 14 years old, sitting at a tiny little desk. And thankfully, when I got into 8th grade, Mr. Wally was my art teacher, saw that I had talent. And he said, Arie, your father is not a Rockefeller. You're going to be an artist. I'm going to guide you to the 4 years of high school. And he did. He was a fantastic teacher, a good human being. And and what you do when you come, when you leave the places and so on. I mean, I loved living in Israel. Later I went to Rome, and it's, I'm just delighted to be alive. The world doesn't owe me a damn thing. It really doesn't. I like to have my sense of humor. Everybody has a certain pain. I have mine. Uh, but being alive, being a part of a family. I met Sarah at my first opening in Chicago. I was showing in New York, and then Chicago comes in, and I'm flying into Chicago, and I'm busy putting on the show, and then in walks in a friend of mine from high school, Joanne, and with this other woman, and I'm what? I'm about, I would say, 80 feet away in a gallery from where I saw her go through the door. I still remember the red dress with black and white polka dots, and my brain said, "That's my wife." I said, "Please, Lord, don't let her be married." And she wasn't. So, so I fell in love, and 3 months later, I literally proposed to her, and I got a great deal out of it because I got also, she came with 2 children. So I had an instant. All I had to do is add some water and food, and there was a family. And people always told me my son looks like me, and I told them I bought him the best jeans I could afford, and God bless his father, and God bless the whole family, that we are all living together, and so on. And my son and my daughter are here, and my son paid me great honor to have me become an internet rabbi. In that picture, it was Elie Wiesel, I look like the rabbi to the mob, and I became an internet rabbi, and I married my son and my wonderful daughter-in-law, Rachel, and and it was good. And at the same time, his biological father, Richie, was able to walk into the chuppah, which is something I felt that important, where the things reversed, that you would want to walk your child to the chuppah. And I love them all. And and by the way, my grandkids couldn't say Zadie for whatever reason. It's my grandson, they started calling me Lily. So now my granddaughter, Harper and Declan, I am Lily. I never knew I was going to be a Lily, but I'm very, very proud, and of that. And so what can you say? It's just in a certain way, it's a blessing. In a certain way, it's a complete blessing to have gone through it and came out the other side without being embittered and lonesome and hateful. I think that is the thing. And to have friends, I see some of them here. I see some of you people, friends and acquaintances that I've met through some other ways. I see Alma, I see others like Jerome, who's right there. How you doing? And Diane. Great friends. It's amazing. It's amazing how you can work with people, that are creative from different. And I see, hi Bella. I see a lot of people. It's just amazing that most people, given the chance, okay, are good. You don't judge them instantly by whatever the heck you want to judge them by. You find out, you open yourself up to humanity, they usually open themselves right back at you. And I'm very honored by that.
I saw one question coming from Jeremy Haft. He asks what you're working on now.
All right. Okay, what I'm working right now, I just finished a suite of quadriptychs and paintings and acrylics of seasons, and it's going to be this September and running through January. I'm having a retrospective exhibition here at Soka of my work, and that's going to be in there. I've finished that. I just went back again 2 summers ago to Poland for 2 weeks, and I was working in Stare Sącz, which is right next to Nowy Sącz, where my mother comes from. And that's in Galicia, in sort of southeast of Krakow. I did a whole suite of things based upon aerial view of Galicia. And now I'm doing something called chromov, which is like chroma and fauve mixture, which I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna go bonkers. And I'm drawing landscapes, aerial landscapes, but using colors which absolutely do not reflect the landscape. You know, they're violets and magentas and blues and taupes and you name it. It's just, you can have red fields with, I don't know, blue flowers and yellow roads and whatever. I'm just having a good time. It just feels good to work in color. It just feels so good to be able to work on canvas again and so on. And that's right, a couple of days ago was my half birthday. I'm 76 and a half. So we'll see what happens later. Thank God for being able to live that long, and hopefully I still got a few years ahead of me. At least I hope to still be able to dance the polka in 10 years, and maybe keel over after dancing, but I still intend to dance it. So it's yes. Anyway, that's basically what it is, and I really do want to thank you all for participating here and being here. And it's so nice to see it, and so nice to see faces I know and faces that I don't know. But I'm totally honored that you showed here. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you.